Great. Let's just hope it works. I think about tribe building in 4 separate parts. There's the monoculture, or the mainstream world, which we grew up in, and then one day we leave. And we leave and we take a hero's journey. And we take a hero's journey into individuation. We see what we like, what we don't like, who we are. We make a lot of mistakes. We meet many mentors and allies. We start to form an identity outside of the monoculture. This is kind of step 1 in tribe building in the modern day. And in the past, after you went on this hero's journey, you would have been reintegrated into your tribe or into the monoculture or the mainstream as a new human being. Unfortunately today, for most people, there isn't a home to return to, or the tribe that I grew up in isn't actually the tribe that I want to return to. And also everything separated, everything fragmented, everything went its own way after people graduated high school, basically. So once you go through the hero's journey, you're in this individuation process, and then you start meeting these friends and these allies. And the cool thing is a lot of your friends that you meet on the hero's journey actually want to build a village with you. Most of my friends these days, and most people I talk to, want to build a village with their friends. They want to live in proximity to aligned people, whether that's in a city or on the outskirts of a city. So this is like finding friends and aligned people. And then how do we actually create a real sense of tribe again then? So this is level 4 of the entire framework. Is like tribe is more than just friends. It's more than just proximity. It's a deeper sense of loyalty, of ethos, of shared values, of shared bonds, of a shared ideal, of a sense of like, this is who we are and that's where we're going and we're going together. And I think these 4 layers are really interesting because they have different morality that is required at each one. There's different virtue that's required at each one. And there's a different like worldview. And I would love to kind of talk about this today with you, is this modern tribe building, maybe what tribes used to be in the past and what they can be in the future. So anyways, I'm here with Sam. We've done a couple podcasts before. You can find Sam's channel and stuff down below if you're watching on YouTube. So I guess to start with for you, Sam, let's talk about tribes in the past. What were they to you? What are your thoughts or thinking around what a tribe was?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to acknowledge that we weren't there in the past. And so it's easy to have like an overly simplistic narrative about what those tribes were, either overly positive, so a romantic view, or sort of they were just barbarians. Neither of these are really true. I think what I would talk about is the practices, like what those tribes, what we understand that they did. Because this is a way to try to orient us back to what I would call the roots of human culture. It's what held those tribes together that we have forgotten, that we are trying to remember. That's what I think is most important about looking at the tribes of the past.
Yeah, looking at specific practices, is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, well, the main one is any practice that involves creating a shared rhythm. It's basically that those tribes would drop in together as a way of getting in sync. And when they build synchrony in their nervous systems, that actually brings the entire field, the entire community, into coherence. And it was that coherence that allowed those tribes to function effectively in the world, to go and get food, to fight off invaders, to explore new lands. It's bringing the tribe into that state of internal coherence. That's like the most important element of those practices.
It's really interesting because that's not what I would have thought as like the most important, but it's almost like a shared lifestyle. My girlfriend recently went on a trip with someone and she didn't feel like they had a shared rhythm. It was really hard for her because they would wake up at different times. They'd like to do different things and there was lack of coherence. And that with me, she's always like, I just feel like we share the exact same rhythm in life. And I think it's a very interesting thing in extending that to a tribe. Yeah, I remember hearing stories of like Native Americans, of African tribes, of different tribes and going to sleep all at the same time, these kinds of things, building this almost shared consciousness within the group.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting starting point. Go on.
If I can say, I think that also speaks to the real impact of feeling like many people feel that we don't quite fit into the mainstream in modern culture. It's because most of our consciousness is essentially designed, evolved in that tribal consciousness, right? In that tribal setting. And what that means is that if you were off on your own in a tribal context, you are exiled. You are subject to the forces of nature with no one to help you, with no family, with no love, no attention around you.
Yeah.
And that was deadly so much of the time. This speaks to why in the modern world, when we just go off on our own, we feel called to meet other people who are like-minded, because getting together, this is a very basic fact about tribes, it makes us strong again. We just have to create tribes of our own that sort of appeal to the values that we have.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about exile. In the ancient world, exile would have been perhaps the scariest fate of all, to have to be exiled from your city, your tribe, or nation. And I would say most people today live their lives in pseudo-exile. So you don't really have anyone that you truly feel bonded to, would like live and die for. There's lack of deep sense of love, familial bonds, community, wider community. And I think within that, people are obviously longing for a deep sense of belonging, building tribe again. I think it's really hard to do that today. There's a lot of reasons it's hard to do that. Yeah, I feel like most people live their lives in pseudo-exile.
Yeah, I would say you're speaking to the conditions that create the modern meaning crisis. Many people in the West feel this crisis of meaning where they're disembedded, they're dislocated, they don't resonate with the world that exists around them. And that leads people to feel not only domicide, like a profound loss of home, as if their home has just been burned down, and not only lack of belonging, they don't feel that they belong to anything, but they feel that the world itself is not actually coherent. They feel that they live in an absurd world where they lack purpose and meaning in life. This is like really consequential. This is like the foundational elements of what it means to be a human being that we're missing. And we're missing it because we lack the community that can give us those qualities. Not just a sense of belonging again, but a sense of shared purpose, a sense of ethos, a sense of togetherness.
What you're speaking to, I've always thought of as the big questions of life. What is sacred? What is virtue? What is best? How do you face death? What is death? What happens after you die? These questions are big, and they weigh in the deep existential parts of humans' nature. And usually society and culture is oriented completely around the big questions, or a sacred center, the sacred questions of life. And because there's an orientation point, everything had more meaning. Oh, the way I pour my tea and craft my bow in ancient Japan was oriented around a sacred center of wa, or harmony, of excellence, of like Zen Buddhism, there was this like that which was best and celebrated gave meaning and function to all the crafts of daily life and all the duties or responsibilities. There was a culture. So cultures are built around a sacred center of some kind, the big questions of life. But recently in modernity, what happened is we had the separation of church and state. We had the secularization of everything. Oh, we have to remove the big questions from life. We talk about politics. We talk about the economy, the sports game. We talk about getting good grades. We talk about other people. But how many people sit down in the classroom like, let's talk about God. Let's talk about what happens when you die. Let's talk about what is best. How do we celebrate what is best? And then how do we connect in deep ways around what is best, or ritual? So because we lost these things, we lost an orientation point. Now there's good and bad with that. This gives room for new culture to emerge, to rid ourselves of old dogma, to have more freedom. And this is more progressive, this is more liberal. And that's good. But at the same time, when you lose the orientation point, what happens is massive disorientation. So the meaning crisis, or the meta crisis, the loneliness, so many different problems that people struggle with, like addiction as well. It comes from a lack of orientation. Man is profoundly disoriented in the modern age. And this orientation in solving it is about orienting ourselves back into a field of coherence with a community that has an actual ideal again. Because when you have this, all of a sudden you were like, hey, I found people that celebrate a way of life and an ideal that I can get behind. If you're a conservative Christian, for instance, you have that. It's very simple. It's like we are connected to the land and we're connected to Christ and sovereignty of some kind. I think for other people, it's harder. So, like for me, it is the sacred ideal of vitality and harmony. How can we create vitality and flourishing with our friends, with our tribe? How can we live in our lives in a way that's more solar, that's more embodied, and more generative? And I think we could go deeper into my philosophy and perhaps ideology at a different time, but I think like the issue is we're trying to reestablish orientation points and let those orientation points establish tribes. And this is why I think we're going to see the rise of many spiritual subcultures. In fact, I think the most successful subcultures of the future will be oriented around a specific spiritual practice or specific spiritual calling. And this will give great orientation to people's lives. And when I think about tribe, when I think about an ancient tribe versus a modern tribe, the thing that's actually going to bridge the gap is when we can figure out where culture comes from. And I think culture does come from this shared sense of celebration, of prayer, of spiritual practice of some kind, of a way of life or a rhythm and a lifestyle. And this is what I always say to tribe leaders is like, figure out your ethos and then figure out your lifestyle and then figure out the people who already share that lifestyle and ethos and how can you live by them. Because we don't live in the age where we need to convert everyone. It's the age of subcultures. I don't know. I
think what we see in the modern world as well is that people have these instincts for spiritual experience. We have kind of religious DNA that is within us and that's not going anywhere. But when we pursue these spiritual paths in an individualistic way, we subject ourselves to all of these different risks. Spiritual addictions of different kinds, addictions to different kinds of substances, but also addictions to worldviews that no one else necessarily shares. So when we combine our sort of, what would you call our spiritual calling with the path of individualism, we open up a whole vista of risks that are not apparent to us if we get into community again. And this is why you're talking about orientation in a community context. What I hear you saying is that it's those communities that scaffolded and safeguarded techniques of ecstasy that would allow people reliable, time-tested ways of stepping out of their own skin, giving them access to ego death, giving them access to means of self-transcendence, stepping outside of the normal frameworks of sense-making that they use. This is the whole point of the spiritual instinct, but it's only when it's really held in community that it's safe for most people.
I agree and would push back on that. I think what you're actually speaking to is the sacred institution around spiritual practice, which would have been schools of initiation in the ancient world, or like higher levels of the priesthood, or the cult of Mithras, or the mystery school, basically. So I think there was sacred institutions in the classical world around spiritual practice. Now, I don't think perhaps all tribes functioned as a way of spiritual practice, but also the tribe could be extremely limiting in terms of your actual spiritual development. For instance, Socrates was killed because he questioned the gods and taught. He was corrupting the minds of the youth, apparently. Do you know how many people have been exiled or killed from tribes because they questioned the sacred order or questioned the gods? And this is what I was saying, like progressivism, liberalism. Ideas in some ways are amazing because we got to question the dogmas that ruled the West, which is really powerful. But at the same time, because we got so questioning, that we're like, let's deconstruct everything. And I'm like, whoa. That was built for a reason. Why was it built? So this is the same problem with tribes in general, is tribes and tribalism. And the reason a lot of people are nervous about tribalism is because it reestablishes a sense of coherence or allegiance to an idea and an identity that if you start to question, you have to leave the tribe basically, or you get exiled, which is really hard, which is basically the problem that must get integrated, or how this is why tribes need to evolve to the next octave. So yes, tribes give a foundation for spiritual practice, which is religion to me. Shared spiritual practice. I know people have problems with religion, okay, and the word religion. But religion, I'm just using it as a lifestyle and shared spiritual practice. Very powerful. And religion has always been associated with law, with things of like order. And then we have spirituality, which to me is much more individualistic and transcendent, and it's focused on your personal relationship. But when that is taken outside of the context of an order, community, or religion, this is where we get into deep danger. I think we see the same thing with technologies. We don't have the sacred institution around it anymore. But that's a whole different side quest. So I'd push back on that a little bit.
Yeah. And so part of the direction I would want to speak to now is what are the tribes of the future? In what way can we hope and expect and create tribes that are different in some way than what we've seen before? And I think one of the qualities here is that they have this capacity to hold both of the perspectives that we're invoking, right? It's true that when individuals just pursue their own spiritual path, well, that can be extremely freeing. We get sovereignty to experience God directly. That's amazing. At the same time, it can be very risky and throw many people off the path. While at the same time, in groups, they can support and scaffold people's spiritual journey, but they can also repress the individual and give them, like, they don't give people access to, again, techniques of ecstasy. So both perspectives are true at the same time. The question I'm then asking is, can we imagine cultures, communities that can support both individual and collective at once? And that's something that I'm not convinced that we've really seen that before. And the reason I'm not convinced of that is because there's so much human potential. There's so much potential that's locked inside us that I feel motivated to explore, right? Can we create communities that really allow that to shine, that bring that out of people? To me, that would be something new.
Lucas has an amazing idea on this. Of how do you have a collective consciousness mixed with the epitome of individual and spiritual will? And the idea is how can you create a culture where how can you create a culture that has a centralization of like power, order, and law, but its entire purpose and pursuit is to maximize and celebrate an individual's freedom to the most capacity, while it's still, it's basically how can you celebrate an individual? He says it so much better than me. How can you have a celebration within culture of an individual's freedom, but also a deep respect for the whole in which you're coming from? And this is something we have a problem with today, is because, like, for instance, when I grew up kind of in the suburbs, not really, but like kind of the monoculture, the mainstream world, and then I had this great spiritual awakening, I rejected everything. I rejected our government, I rejected technology, I rejected the food system, the healthcare system. I just saw all of our institutions were totally corrupt. Our government was corrupt. My parents were lying to me. And I'm going to go find God and like take my spiritual path. And this actually creates this deep, almost like chosen one kind of energy. Is I'm special. It's like the classic new age spirituality awakening. It's like you're so special and you're awakened and you see. And I really felt that. But the issue is because I wasn't embedded into a culture that I respected to some degree, like I think it did lead me into a lot of dangerous territory necessarily. So I think the real problem is we didn't have a culture that had a sacred center that I could respect. And because of that, I just rejected all of it. And now I'm coming back and like appreciating, wow, airplanes, really cool. I'm grateful I have this phone and this microphone so that we can do all of these amazing things. Like I like technology. I like the things that we have created and the civilization we have created. It's just there's some inherent problems. So I think individualism and collectivism is a big tension. I think even better than looking at how do we fix civilization, because I am not a fan of this question at all. I think the better question is how do we build these subcultures that get to run radical new experiments of their own ideology, approach to life, and spiritual practice? And how do we help those subcultures rise quickly, efficiently, and organically? Because the more tests we can run, the better we're going to know. And this is why I said I distrust these civilizational narratives completely. Because I'm like, whoever's trying to impose laws and an ideology on a nation of 300 million, let a world of 8 billion, like that's so, it's so tyrannical. It's just going to be about control and whipping everyone to believe the same thing. It's like, no, encourage people to associate with those who think and feel similarly to them. And can we have respect and actual tolerance? Can we have actual tolerance for many tribes to rise? I think this is something that like the progressive left is really bad at. It's very strange. They think they have so much tolerance for people unless they're white and Christian, and they have very low tolerance suddenly. No, like tolerance is if you want to gather around your spiritual practice and ideal, I support you. If you want to gather around your anti-spiritual practice and ideal, I also support you. I support the free association of people. And that's a pretty radical stance. Is I believe that if we can have free association with simple respect for neighbors, perhaps you're going to have to purge the Machiavelli Genghis Khan tribe. Maybe you need to purge that one, or like have some kind of safeguards in place. But nonetheless, like, can we have free association where we get to run experiments on the right balance of individualism, collectivism, innovation and tradition, technology, and I guess nature.
Yeah, to me, I think you're combining a great amount of looking to the past for the pieces that we're missing in the modern day, but also not forgetting or letting out of sight the virtues of modernity. And so I hear this, it's quite evolutionary in a way. It's drawing on the precedents that we have, you know, looking back to the tribes of the past and being willing to admit, hey, they've got many pieces that are kind of foundational to human culture that we could reintegrate. But we shouldn't forget who we are. We're modern people. We have values like free association that were not necessarily available to all people at all times.
Yeah.
How can we integrate those as well? So the question then becomes about, I think, technology. In what ways can we incorporate modern technologies that augment society, that create deeper coherence within tribes, that can create these bonds between different tribes? This is not necessarily something that we see in the past.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because you go from tribes to modern tribes, but there's big arc of civilization in between. And there's also lessons from each stage of civilization. And this is like Ken Wilber's evolutionary psychology and map of how culture has evolved, is like tribal animism and mythic identity. Or mythic identity was next. And this was kind of like the Christian hierarchical mythic order. And then we have the orange rationalist Enlightenment era of scientism and everything that's built the modern world and industry. And then we have this pluralism, this green meme, this, we have a sense for other and a planetary sphere and the ecology and these kinds of things. And how can we include the entire roadmap into the next? This is why I always say, like, Ken Wilber is the philosopher for the tribes of the future, because we need second order thinking. That's really what it is.
Integral thinking, yeah.
And the interesting about integral thinking, though, let's rewind a second here, is when I talked about the different levels of tribes when we started this podcast, is like there's different morality and feeling that we need to like integrate into real tribe formation. And what I mean by that is when you're on your individual's hero's quest, for instance, there's certain virtues that are perhaps the most important. And it's probably courage and surrender. It's the courage to let go of the identity and programming that you grew up with, and the capacity to surrender that which you clutch onto most dearly and just let yourself become something new. Individuation, the hero's journey. The next level of virtue is something much more around like discipline. It's around relationships and harmony. And it's around like whatever. It's basically the ethos that you discover through your hero's journey is what you start to build your tribe around or start to gather people into. And that ethos has to be unique to you. When people list the ethos of their tribes on the Retribalize app, for instance, oftentimes 90% of them feel so watered down to me. I'm like, that's not really an ethos. An ethos is something not everyone can agree with, usually. It's got to be something that actually is claiming something, or else it actually lacks the mimetic power. It lacks the strength to have coherence from many people around. So ethos has to be actually unique to a person. unique to a tribe. What is your spiritual practice? Not everyone's going to agree with it. What kind of food do you like to eat? What's your relationship to technology? What's your relationship to health, to children, to parents, to a lifestyle, to shared, religion, these kinds of things? Not everyone's going to agree with that. Cool. That's fine. This is where you get to freely associate with people who do agree with that. But then there's that deeper consciousness, and that's level 4, which is planetary. And I think this is where we need real second order thinkers. We need the people who build the tribes to become this second order thinker, so that we can have this council of many tribe builders, of many tribe leaders who are able to see the memes that their tribe embodies, or the sensibilities. So I think that's the greatest innovation, is actually a consciousness innovation.
So here you're talking about two different things. One of them is this capacity to essentially plant your flag on a hill and to say, this is my ethos. I'm going to embody that ethos. I'm okay to gather people around me that agree with that, but I'm also okay to let everyone else go that doesn't agree. But at the same time, there's a different capacity, which I hear you talking about as second order thinking. It's this ability not only to plant your flag, but then to let that go, in a sense, to be able to be open to the other people who are also in the world, to recognize that we're part of one planet together, and that to a degree, we need to coordinate at a level that isn't reducible to each of our individual ethos.
Yeah. This is the interesting thing, because this is where a virtue of, or value of inclusion is completely different from a tribe level to a planetary level. Is at a tribe level, please don't include everything and everyone. If I included every single person who applies to come out to a co-living residency, it would be hell on earth. I say no often. It's very important to have boundaries. And it's very important, if you have an ethos, to actually filter for your ethos. This is kind of the weird thing about having an actual ethos is, well, you should live that. And you should find the other people who want to live that with you. Inclusion then happens of how can we create space, tolerance, and respect for other tribes and other walks of life. It doesn't mean that we have to allow everything in to the tribe that we build. And this is the thing I get the most pushback for, I think. One of them. I get pushback on a lot of different ideas I have. But this one, I'm like, I think a lot of these inclusion, very ethereal ideas of world peace, of include everything and love everyone in one love, I think we've seen that tried in the 1960s and 1980s. And it just created, everyone I talk to who's lived in those communities, they're done with the mess. They're like, give me some real structure here. Give me a real ethos. Give me some real concentration again.
Yeah, I think what I would talk about here is looking for an evolution of that sort of sentimentality of the 60s and 70s in a way that, you can frame it in terms of one love, but it's not necessarily the best way to do that. I'm talking about a sort of deeper ontological shift, which is a shift more toward the way that the relationships that we have with each other, but also with the world, even with the objects around us, those relationships really constitute our being. So it's a way of recognizing that the relationships around us actually make us who we are in this profound way. I think what I would say is important about that is it's a genuine evolution. It's not about having a different ethos, because you can embody that relational ontology, whatever your ethos is. But it's a different way of participating in the world. This is what I see as part of the cultural renaissance that's going on, is we're looking for people to embody their different ethos, yes, but we're looking for them to participate in the world. It allows them in a way that allows them to build synergetic relationships with people that have different kinds of ethos. And I think time will really tell the tribes that are actually able to do that. Maybe I could use the body as an example here. The different cells in the body, for example, liver cells, neurons, red blood cells, they each embody, in a sense, their own individual ethos. They're each individuated. Those different cell types are particular. They are who they are. But they're able to be in virtuous relationship. They're able to find synergies between those kinds of cells that give rise to the body as an emergent property. We're looking for that kind of thing, but between the tribes of the future.
This is such a good analogy, the cell, because inside the cell, there's many other different functions. Like there's the mitochondria, I forget the other parts of a cell. So there's a body within a cell. And then there's a cell, which is autonomous, independent. I am a cell, but I'm in relationship to other cells. And that cell is in relationship within a human being. And a human being is not in relationship to an entire tribe. That would be like a mitochondria trying to be in relationship to all the rest of the body, instead of the mitochondria being in relationship to the rest of the cell, and then the cell being in a relationship to the rest of the body. So humans are in a relationship with their tribe, and their tribe is in a relationship with other tribes. And this is the thing that I think is the fundamental shift that we need to move into in the decentralized age, is instead of all of us trying to be global citizens while barely having any sense of real family, chosen family, and tribe around us, it's no, we're trying to be tribal citizens that are in relationship with other tribes. And this is how we can create a much more functioning body on Earth, I think. I don't know. What do you think on this?
Yeah, I would kind of tie this to a critique of technology. And then obviously we already talked a bit about trying to augment the tribes of the future with digitalization. So I'm not saying that like technology is evil or anything like that. But I'm saying there is a tendency for the way that we use technology to fragment human consciousness. It tends to tear people apart from their highest ideal. And it tends to, if you look at the way, for example, that indigenous people in the modern world, when they adopt technology, it has many terrible consequences that are like well documented. No. What I'm sort of saying is there's a spirit that fragments us, and it fragments us both internally within ourselves, but also within the communities that we live in. And so I would like to ask this question about when we talk about integrating and augmenting technology within the tribes of the future, how can we do that in a way that really brings back a sense of wholeness, a sense of unity? That doesn't have to be in a totalizing way, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be about ideologies of unity or oneness, but I'm saying that being able to drop into deeper connectedness, deeper forms of communion that technology can help us get to.
Yeah.
This is a quality that I think is really important.
I agree. I think the way we use technology today and the rapid growth of AI and nuclear weapons and drones and things is extremely problematic and destructive. And even like, for me, when it comes to technology, I can't wait to get into spiritual subcultures and tribal communities where we get to ask a very specific and deep question. How can we use technology in a way that increases vitality of the whole? Question mark. Because no technology and everyone farming, I think actually, yes, that's vitality. Let's start from a point of there. And but what happens if we had great hydroponic systems and perhaps we had robots helping us plant the fields and different types of technology that are helping irrigate the soil? All of a sudden you start adding these things, and how can you add it in a way where people, when they stop having to irrigate the soil by hand or something, all of a sudden they can use their time and energy to increase vitality in a new way, maybe for art, maybe for leisure, literature, creativity. I mean, civilization was built when we figured out how to have more leisure time. The question for me right now is the way we use technology in the world obviously decreases energy. Scrolling for 5 hours a day on Instagram decreases energy. Sitting at a desk, typing all day on these laptops in these certain ways decreases vitality. How we use social media often decreases the vitality of our connections. So, but at the same time, like I use my phone in a way that is extremely vitality increasing often, especially if I'm more connected to human beings, because I scroll less. I use it to create, which increases my abundance and resources and connection to other humans in my life, because I use social media to be more social. I met Sam through Instagram. I met everyone in this co-living house through Instagram. I met like most of my best friends through YouTube. And I use it as a way to actually express myself and increase my energy and increase my power in life. And I think, okay, if you can do that on an individual scale, how can a community approach technology in a way of how does this increase vitality? That's the question mark. It's the measuring stick to me. But how people come up with their solution is all going to look different. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be hilarious. It's going to be great. I'm very excited to run these experiments because never before have communities of people actually run radical social experiments. I'm very excited for this.
I think one of the ways I want to ground this conversation, as we're probably coming toward the end of the interview here, is in terms of an actual vision for the tribes of the future. I want to talk a little bit about what do we actually see? How can we participate in building more of the tribes of the future that we would like to live in? And to me, this looks like a couple different things. It can involve like practicing regenerative forms of land care, participating in this cultural renaissance, which is ongoing, and then creating spaces to actually innovate in terms of collective decision-making and governance, and also local economics again. But I want to talk about this in terms of like the vitalism or vitality that you mentioned. I think in place of that, because when you say vitality, I'm hearing kind of something related to eros. And I think of the success of tribes maybe in this balance of eros and logos. And I'm trying to find a word for me that would capture that. And I think what I see about these tribes in the future is that they're regenerative hubs. They're places where the world and the people in those tribes can really flourish. And I'm trying to think of a word that describes that. And I was thinking actually of the Old Testament. The adjective that's most used to describe God is glorious. And so what I was thinking today is like, can we imagine tribes of the future that are most expressive of glory? You know what I mean?
Yes. Radiance.
Radiance, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have often stated the only thing I really want in this life is to be surrounded by glorious people doing glorious things. Like that's all I want. Really.
Especially in terms of our conversations that involve like reclaiming use of the word power. If I reframe it as glory, to me, glory is a word that includes elements of power, but in a way that's inherently tied to radiance, to beauty, to virtue. Yeah.
I think this deep radiance, it comes and it's rooted deeply in physiology. And our physiology in our body tells us a lot about how to build a really high functioning tribe, which is just a larger body. It's the cell within the body and the body within the tribe. And the tribe has 3 centers, just like our body. It has a will, a heart, and a head. And I think how can we create tribes that maximize the expression of the essence of the animating spirit or culture of the tribe through those centers, just in the same way as the complete and highest version of Sam expresses his will from his higher self in essence. His heart is open and it's flourishing, and the way he loves and interacts with people is from a very open heart. And his mind is connected to God, is connected to light, is connected to intelligence and logos. So it's like, it's logos, it's ethos, it's pathos, it's guts and heart and courage. And how can we create tribes that rank high in those 3 areas? That, I think, is going to create many unique expressions of tribes. And then also within the tribe, there's a head, there's an executive function and a nervous system. I think this is extremely important to get right if you're going to have a flourishing tribe, because nothing would work. That's the first thing that forms from the embryo of a baby is its head and then nervous system. So this is the executive function and the signal carrying to the rest of the body. And then there's a heart, there's a liver, there's the hands that explore the world, there's the feet that can move the tribe, there's the legs and the force that like builds things, that carries the weight and the foundation. So when we're building a tribe, we can look at how the body functions.
Absolutely, it's a very deep form of biomimicry. And I think I would maybe want to close this by talking a little bit about a vision for a network of tribes. I'm talking about networked community hubs that, again, they build these synergetic relationships between each other. Why is that important? Well, we're not wanting to regress into the tribal warfare problem.
No.
We're not wanting just to build tribes. We're wanting to build tribes that are in virtuous relationship with each other. I think the model for this is guilds. Different tribes, they might specialize in different things. Like maybe one tribe is really good at athletics and another tribe is really good at woodworking. And so they develop systems of exchange between them, not only of marriage exchange, but skill sharing. I think what's important about this is relearning to what I would call sacralize the commons. I think, as I was talking earlier, that spirit of fragmentation is really possessing humanity in quite a deep way. To work against that spirit of fragmentation, that diabolical spirit that tears things apart into many different pieces, I think we need to find ways to re-sacralize the space which is between us. And it's the space between individuals just as much as it is the space between tribes. So this is what really inspires me to build bridges, to build relationships with different kinds of people who are very different than me. Because it's from the virtue that is embedded in those relationships that I think we can get genuinely innovative forms of culture. Does that make sense?
I love what you just said. It's sacralizing the space in between. And that's like your relationship ontology, I'm understanding
Exactly.
deeper now. And this is Lucas's thing too, is how can bridge building be an identity and something that's sacred again? And bridge building comes from deep curiosity about where there's power. It's deep, because if something exists, it means there's certain virtues or places of power that they hold that are true. And it's a curiosity about that. And I think this federation of tribes, this network of tribes, I think many people are intuiting that this is the future in some way. I think guilds, like you're saying, each tribe specializing in a certain craft is extremely powerful. And then if a kid graduates or grows up there and is like, I want to go to the other tribe with a different value system, a different guild and craft, cool. Like there's that intermarriage or interplay, or there's so many cool things that we can start experimenting with once we get to the planetary level of a network of tribes. That's the goal of Retribalize. In my lifetime, I'd love to see a network of amazing tribes rise. I am so freaking focused on level 3, it's crazy. Because level 3 is like, how do I build my tribe and how do you build your tribe? Because then we get to start having lots of fun on how do we build a planet of tribes. So that's what Retribalize is all about. There's a link below to join our free matchmaking app if you're watching this on YouTube. Also, Sam is running a residency and co-living house in Italy and then Portugal. We're running ongoing co-living experiences. All of this is happening within the Retribalize Academy. This is our membership community on our app. There's a link below to apply for that as well. And thanks for being on, Sam. I'll link to Sam's socials. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristian. I would just say to close that this relational ontology thing that I'm talking about, it's also a quality that you can feel in deep dialogue. In the dialogue today, we actually learned so much about the worldviews that we share. We were able to disagree, but in a way that was able to kind of create new pathways in the conversation. We reached somewhere that neither of us could kind of reach on our own. And I hear this as a real expression of the spirit that I'm trying to cultivate and make space for. I think it's really important to notice that.
Yeah, the sacred space in between. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks so much.
Boom. That was the longest one we've done, huh?
It was.